So, spoiler, Fnatic is probably one of the most hotly contested in the off-season. Obviously, there was all this drama that we can talk about with some of the players. And I'll say that right now, you'll hear when I read out the names, it does look like they've actually assembled a very good roster. So their story obviously was about the whole back and forth. Would they be able to get Wunder? Was Wunder actually then going to be sold to like fucking BDS and then secretly instantly sold to them? Like, there's all sorts of jazz going on with that. So basically, Wunder is going to be the top lane player. They're getting Razork, formerly of Misfits, for the jungle. Humanoid, obviously the double champion last year with Mad Lions, comes in as mid lane, replacing Niski. Obviously, Bwippo went to Team Liquid, by the way, and Adam actually went over to the BDS team or whatever it is. And then they just retain the bot lane they had last year, Opset and Hylissang, who a lot of people said was the best bot lane. They retain Yamato Cannon as their coach. So what are your initial thoughts, Amazing, on this lineup? Like, are you in my camp? Do you actually think this is a good lineup? I'm actually impressed that Fnatic's kind of got all these big names.
I mean, I'm kind of impressed by the fact that, I mean, actually, getting Razork and Humanoid, I think, are very good steps, but I'm really wondering about Wunder. Like, I think the overall roster looks really clean to me in the sense that they have like a similar style and they kind of play a similar way, so they all want to kind of aggress and do something, be a bit more crazy. I would suppose even Upset has gotten to that point, but I don't know how Wunder is going to adapt to, like, I don't know, having that almost like forceful remotivation to a certain extent. So that is something where I'm like, kind of keen to just see it, because in my head it can work out really, really well. But if it's like, if the memes are true, whatever it is, and his work ethic is as like subpar to a certain extent, and as some people claim, or as it's been claimed by especially fans, that could really clash with the personalities of Upset, I would suppose. You know, that's where I see an issue where you already have like drama before the season even starts to a certain extent.
What do you think, Rich?
Yeah, so I kind of have the same opinion, which is I think the biggest question mark in terms of like player quality is definitely Wunder. And the question is, will Wunder be somewhat close to his peak prior to last year, or will he be more reminiscent of last year, right? I think if he's the former, this is legitimately one of the best Western lineups on paper of all time. If you get prime Wunder, right, 2019 Wunder. If you don't, it's still obviously a very good lineup, but if we're being honest, Wunder wasn't just, below his prime last year. He was bad. He was, in the context of LEC, he was bad. So it really depends on what version of Wunder they get. One thing actually I wanted to ask Amazing about on this lineup, because Amazing obviously is a jungler. Razork for me, especially last year, was like the best EU jungler. Obviously, Inspired won the summer MVP, which I thought was really weird, because to me, I thought Inspired had an amazing spring, and I thought he was maybe even the spring MVP, but not actually really so much in summer. And to me, over the course of the year, but especially like first half of summer, Razork was like by far the best jungler. So as a jungler, I'm kind of interested in what your perspective is on like Razork. Do you think he is the best Western jungler at the moment, or how do you see it?
I mean, I think he's like how to put this? He's kind of similar to Spica. He's slightly better mechanically, but I think he's worse when it comes to thinking about his own game plan. I think Razork is someone that's like, if you look at also how high he has been ladder throughout the years, whatever it is, he's always like top 10 at least, and then usually competes for top 1. So he definitely has the mechanical ability. But his biggest issue, and that's also from coaching him to a certain extent, is that he doesn't retain knowledge very well. So that means like you can tell him one thing one day and he's going to forget it about the next day. So you have to keep reiterating whatever it is that you want to teach him. So when it came to the lineup last year, when I saw it from the outside, right, because I didn't personally work with them, I saw that they kind of adapted to a certain extent to that, and then they became really good. So when the game plans were kind of made out, and like the game plans were really laid out for Misfits, especially in summer, they became really clean in terms of execution, because the mechanical ability was there and Razork has it. But as soon as the meta kind of shifted a bit and they kind of had to reiterate knowledge, like kind of get back into the flow, find different things, and the routines changed, he suddenly didn't find the place anymore and was kind of stuck in the same position he was in spring and the year before that, where he couldn't find the place, he didn't make the place, he didn't know how to properly operate within his team's concept. So I think it's really dependent on how intelligent Fnatic operates, and given the overall structure, I don't think that this is like... They would have been better off if they had basically the equivalent of an Inspired instead of an equivalent of Razork, who's more like of a mechanical jungler. Like, it just that's at least my point of view. If they have had a different coach, maybe that'd be different again. But I think Yamato is not necessarily someone that's really good at retaining routines. I think he's really good at like just creating volatile playstyles and finding the best potential outcomes for his team within that volatile playstyle. So that's what it depends on, Like if they have enough knowledge overall and can compensate, then he's going to be fine. But if they don't, then I think it could backfire a bit.
Yeah, I've got a couple of angles on this one. One is I totally agree with the Wunder one. I'm sure most people are in this sport where if literally they're getting the player who played last year, yeah, of course you'd say no thanks, like that's a bad move. The point is, and this is why I think a number of teams potentially could have signed Wunder, what you're really gambling on is that last year was the anomaly and he's actually maybe that was just his down period or he wasn't in the best headspace. He's going to get out of that and he doesn't even have to be the best in this lineup. He just to be if he was just an average LEC top laner, it's enough with this lineup. They could be the champion. They don't have to be the best player. So I think even the pressure is somewhat off him. I'll say this publicly and definitely privately. I heard from some of the G2 people that supposedly the whole meme of him not practicing, that was already gone, especially by the summer, definitely. They already knew by then you have to practice properly. And I'd heard basically that what's weird is they said in scrims he was the best player on G2 and he was actually stomping everyone, but then bizarrely on stage he just never showed up. And then similarly, I'll add this in as well. I was hearing all these weird things that when teams would scrim against G2, I think even when Worlds came around or something, that whatever lineup they were using, they were actually beating some of these international teams. So it sounds like one of those ones where I could believe behind the scenes, players themselves, hopefully they asked the players. Maybe players saw enough that they were it's worth a gamble. If you put this guy in a different team, maybe he comes back to being really good and he hasn't lost it or whatever. He isn't washed. So I'll trust that they asked people Upset Humanoid, etc. And maybe they gave him the skinny on that. And then my bigger angle actually is just the Fnatic angle. This is something I want to talk to both of you about, but particularly you, Rich, because obviously you've been somewhat critical of Fnatic over the years along this particular vein, which is the impressive part to me. I'll contrast it with the LCS episode we just did. On the LCS episode, the reason why it was so criminal, the names, the best name they had on their list was basically Mickey X, and that's only because, bizarrely, he also doesn't really have many destinations this year. Aside from that, they don't actually have on TSM even any sexy names that they're signing out. Then the good players aren't attracted to go to TSM anymore. And one of the reasons why, it's an obvious one, is they don't even have Bjergsen anymore. That was the last thing you had left. That's a reason someone might join your team to play with Bjergsen, Perks, etc. When I look at this team, this makes me wonder, because I personally said last year, this year technically, I always forget we're still in the same year, which is in the off-season. I said earlier this year, I think it's the end for Fnatic of the era where they can attract players on the similar merit, right? Here's the issue I have. This makes me wonder if that's not quite true, though, because I wonder if the fact that they kept the bot lane that most players would say was probably the best. I feel like people like Humanoid joined this team to play with Upset and Hylissang, mate. I don't think he joined because it's Fnatic or because they had some outrageous amount of money, because obviously fans would say, why not just stay in Mad Lions? Spoiler, and we'll obviously get into this, teams like Rogue and Mad Lions are going to keep doing this, guys. They are going to sell their best talents for massive amounts of money, and then they are going to try the same method that got them their talents, which is they're going to get people from the RLs and they're going to hope they can keep doing it, because unfortunately they're just not in the position to be like the G2s and Team Liquids of the world and just buy and maintain the best rosters. So to me, someone like Humanoid just looked around. He was like, right, where can I go that has the best actual lineup? Because that's usually what the EU players want. And I, by the way, I don't disagree with him. This looks like pretty much the best. Bear in mind, you're not getting caps to spot on G2. So as far as I can tell, I actually like a lot about this roster. I'm not even that worried about the Wunder angle. I think the team's so good. If you think about the team that Humanoid had with Mad Lions, the best players in that team, and basically the reason why they were so amazing in the mid game was Humanoid. It was Humanoid, the jungler, and the support. Well, look at his fucking support and jungler in this team. You could actually argue it's probably the only team you could go to. They might be better. The team actually might be better than the one he had. And I thought Kaiser was an amazing player. So I think they've killed it. As much as I can criticise Fnatic, I think however they got this lineup together, they did a great job this off-season.
Yeah, I think there's two sort of main angles here. The first one is, and I basically said I guess before this season just gone, that I felt that this would probably be Fnatic's last year as being a really prominent org that default attracted loads of players because of their name and history or whatever, and that they would probably start dropping back into the pack. This is the best off-season Fnatic have had in ages, and it came at a perfect time to reverse, at least at a minimum, my own narrative, right? I think this is almost as pixel perfect an off-season as they could have had, realistically speaking. Could you have got, I don't know, Otto instead of Wunder? I mean, Otto's under contract, right? I think there's very few moves you could have done that are better than the moves that they did do. One funny thing, which kind of reminds me of a couple of other situations that have happened in the last few off seasons as well. I think the main reason, I feel comfortable saying this because I actually think I've read this in some Reddit threads, so I know this at least did somewhat seep into the public psyche.
Yeah.
One of the biggest reasons that Razork wanted to go to Fnatic was he's like best friends with Niski, and now Niski's out there. So yeah, I mean maybe I'm overstating best friend, but like they were very close. I believe that was like the main reason. Obviously he's on a very good roster. He's not like he's going to sit there and complain and be like, oh, what a fucking joke, now I have to play with these idiots. But yeah, so that's pretty funny. But no, I think from top from top to bottom, I think it's a well put together roster. And the thing is, I think most people would have either Fnatic or Vitality as their preseason favorites, let's say. I favor Fnatic for two reasons. One, I actually just think the roster's a little bit better. But two, I think there's less volatility that will be likely on this team, which obviously we'll get into with Vitality later. But as Amazing said, the only thing that's really, a bit concerning is historically Upset has taken issue with certain players on certain rosters on certain periods of time. So if there is to be an issue, I guess that would be the source of it. But, other than this drama with Adam, which if you actually really peel back the nuts and bolts of it, I don't think what Upset wanted to do in the offseason was really egregious anyway. Like, wow, he wanted to get rid of the weakest player and replace him with, in his head, a better player. Spoiler alert, every single player does that at the end of every single season, unless you are literally like season 5 SKT or something and want to run it back or whatever. It's like a default mindset, right? So I don't think that's anything to really be overly concerned about. So yeah, no, I think they killed it.
No, but you're right in terms of like what you talked about Fnatic in just in general. Like it's I think they didn't sign anyone, or like no one signed for Fnatic this year, like because it's Fnatic. I think it's just a way to honestly have a good contract, because Fnatic does pay well, like we know this. Overall, they actually have pretty they're really fair in terms of their contracts too, that they don't cut players like randomly, whatever it is, so they keep it on the contracts too over the course of time when the contract is still running. So it's not like they have any kind of shady business tactics in terms of what I've seen. So anyone that joins Fnatic simply knows that he's going to get paid well, and now they also know that they have upside in listing at every single point. So I think that's a really good selling point at this point in time, especially given how unstable like a lot of the other rosters seem to be. Even G2 fell apart over this year, I suppose, and kind of doesn't have the same attraction anymore. So the staple that Fnatic provides is really, really attractive to so many players nowadays, I would say.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.